Toronto's light favorites, 98.1 CHFI, and relax with us online at chfi.com.
From the heart of the city, this is the soundtrack to Snowflakes. Good evening, I'm Don Jackson. No two snowflakes are identical, right? Well, that's what we've been led to believe. There's at least one exception to the rule. The Richmond, Virginia Times-Dispatch reported in 1988, scientist Nancy Knight of the U.S. National Center for Atmospheric Research reported finding two identical snowflakes. Twin, simple, thick, hollow, columnar crystals, while studying high-altitude cirrus clouds 20,000 feet over Wisconsin. The flakes were practically newborns and hadn't had time for the final touches to their shapes. Unquote. Snowflakes, tonight, with Lovers and Other Strangers from 98.1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Sarah McLachlan with An Ordinary Miracle, and the Beatles, In My Life. A couple of items reported in the Social Studies column of the Tuesday, January the 29th issue of the Globe and Mail piqued my interest. Ken Lebrecht is the chairman of the physics department at the California Institute of Technology. He studies the physics of snow crystals. And this is what he has learned in all of his studies, and I quote what he said on U.S. National Public Radio. One thing you can do as a physicist is you can try to calculate how many ways there are to make a snowflake. And I've done that. And it's a very large number. The number of ways to make a complex snowflake is far greater than the total number of atoms in the universe. And with such large numbers, you can say fairly confidently that if you looked at all the snowflakes that grew on Earth, you would never see one that looked exactly the same as the first one you saw. Unquote. And thereby hangs the truth. Lovers and Other Strangers from 98.1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Colin James, Into the Mystic, and Rob Thomas, Ever the Same. Snowflakes. No two are exactly alike. Similar, but different. The San Diego Union Tribune reported this story. It also was included in the January 21st issue of the Globe and Mail's Social Studies column, and I quote, "The gold standard of twin research is identical twins separated at birth and raised in different environments. Perhaps the best-known case is Oscar and Jack, separated when they were 6 months old. Oscar was raised a Catholic in Nazi Germany, at one point joining the Hitler Youth. Jack was adopted by a Jewish father and grew up in Trinidad. He later became an officer in the Israeli Navy." Unquote. As I said in the Globe and Mail, the twins met briefly in 1954 and didn't see each other again until 25 years later when they took part in a study of twins. Their similarities were eerie. They walked into the lab wearing identical navy blue shirts and epaulets. Each wore a rubber band around his wrist. Under questioning, each revealed that he read books from back to front, wore tight bathing suits, and liked to pretend to sneeze in elevators to watch others jump. Unquote. Snowflakes tonight. Lovers and Other Strangers from 98.1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Sister Sledge, and we are family. My companion writing is called Agree to Disagree. Log on right now to the CHFI website. Follow the links on the homepage to my daily weblog at chfi.com. And Lovers and Other Strangers returns. I'm Don Jackson.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is Lovers and Other Strangers on 98.1 CHFI. Toronto's light favorites, 98.1 CHFI. And relax with us online at chfi.com.
And welcome back to Snowflakes with Lovers and Other Strangers. Now a blog as well at chfi.com. I'm Don Jackson. The writer of this is unknown. It is called The Results of Initiative. Some years ago, 3 brothers left the farm to work in the city. They were all hired by the same company at the same pay. 3 years later, Jim was being paid $500 a month. Frank was receiving $1,000. But George was now making $1,500. Their father decided to visit the employer. He listened to the confused father and said, "I will let the boys explain for themselves." Jim was summoned to the supervisor's office and was told, "Jim, I understand the Far East Importers has just brought in a large transport plane loaded with import goods. Will you please go over to the airport and get a cargo inventory?" 3 minutes later, Jim returned to the office. The cargo was 1,000 bolts of Japanese silk, Jim reported. "I got the information over the telephone from a member of the crew." When Jim left, Frank, the $1,000 a month brother, was called. "Frank," said the supervisor, "I wish you'd go to the airport and get an inventory of the cargo plane which was just brought in by Far East Importers." An hour later, Frank was back in the office with a list showing that the plane carried 1,000 bolts of Japanese silk, 500 transistor radios, and 1,000 hand-painted bamboo trays. George, the $1,500 a month brother, was given identical instructions. When working hours were over, he finally returned. The transport plane carried 1,000 bolts of Japanese silk, he began. It was on sale at $60 a bolt, so I took a 2-day option on the whole lot. I have wired a designer in New York offering the silk at $75 a bolt. I expect to have the order tomorrow. I also found 500 transistor radios, which I sold over the telephone at a profit of $2.30 each. There were 1,000 bamboo trays, but they were of poor quality, so I didn't try to do anything with them. When George left the office, the employer smiled. "You probably noticed," he said, "that Jim doesn't do what he's told. Frank does only what he's told. But George does without being told." The future is full of promise for one who shows initiative. .1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Hayley Sales with What You Want, and Elton John with Daniel. This is called Perceptions, its author unknown. There were 2 brothers in a small village in the Eastern Cape. The twin brothers grew up knowing nothing else but poverty. Their father was an alcoholic, and their mother was a domestic worker. They grew up with very little. On their way home one day, their parents were involved in a bus accident and died instantly. The brothers' condition became even worse. At age 17, they separated. Years and years later, a family member decided to find them for a family reunion. One of the brothers was a wealthy engineer owning a construction company. He had a wife and 3 beautiful kids. The other was an alcoholic with no sense of direction for his life. The family member asked the engineer, "How did your life turn out like this?" "Well, what did you expect? With a childhood like mine," he answered. She moved on to the other brother with the same question. "What did you expect? With a childhood like mine," was his answer. This tells us that men are not disturbed by the things that happened, but by their perception of the things that happened. .1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Chantal Kreviazuk with All I Can Do. Which brings me back to my original point that no two snowflakes are exactly alike. The Los Angeles Daily News reported, in the end, it took a snowstorm, an icy mountain pass, and a chance encounter to melt the frosty feud between Naomi Duran and her little brother Fernando. Unquote. This was also reported in the Globe and Mail's social studies column. Apparently there was quite a snowstorm in California. We think of sun and sand when we think of the American West Coast, but that's not the case in some of the higher elevations. There were literally hundreds of stranded motorists on I-5, the interstate that connects northern and southern California that day. Brother and sister were also on that route in separate vehicles. According to the Daily News, Fernando is a truck driver. He needed to have his cargo delivered by 6 in the morning, but the weather forced him off at 2 at a truck stop called the Pilot Travel Centers. He figured he would wait out the storm in the company of other truck drivers who were doing the same thing. His sister just happened to pull into the same truck stop at 8:30 that same morning. She was on her way to visit their sister. She saw her brother, walked up to him, and the long-running feud was finally put to rest. They may look similar, but as I said, no two snowflakes are exactly alike. They do, however, share a common bond. Family. .1 CHFI. Stay tuned. Lovers and Other Strangers returns. I'm Don Jackson.
Your life set to words and music. Lovers and Other Strangers on 98.1 CHFI. Toronto's light favorites, 98.1 CHFI, and relax with us online at CHFI.com.
We're in the heart of Toronto, around the world on the internet, and now a blog as well at CHFI.com. My companion writing is called Agree to Disagree. Log on now to the CHFI website and follow the links on the homepage to my companion writing at CHFI.com. Good evening once again, I'm Don Jackson. This is called Handwriting on the Wall. Its author unknown. A weary mother returned from the store, lugging groceries through the kitchen door. Awaiting her arrival was her 8-year-old son, anxious to relate what his younger brother had done. While I was out and Dad was on a call, TJ took his crayons and wrote on the wall. "It's on the new paper you just hung in the den." I told him you'd be mad at having to do it again. She let out a moan and furrowed her brow. "Where is your little brother right now?" She emptied her arms, and with a purposeful stride, she marched to his closet where he had gone to hide. She called his full name as she entered his room. He trembled with fear. He knew that meant doom. For the next 10 minutes, she ranted and raved about the expensive wallpaper and how she had saved. Lamenting all the work it would take to repair, she condemned his actions and total lack of care. The more she scolded, the madder she got, then stormed from his room totally distraught. She headed for the den to confirm her fears. When she saw the wall, her eyes flooded with tears. The message she read pierced her soul with a dart. It said, "I love Mummy," surrounded by a heart. Well, the wallpaper remained just as she found it, with an empty picture frame hung to surround it. A reminder to her, indeed, to all. Take time to read the handwriting on the wall. .1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Sarah McLachlan with Adia, and 5 for Fighting with the Riddle. Snowflakes tonight. This is called How Much Does a Miracle Cost? Its author is unknown. Sally was only 8 years old when she heard Mummy and Daddy talking about her little brother. He was very sick, and they had done everything they could afford to save his life. Only a very expensive surgery could help him now, and that was out of the financial question. She heard Daddy say it with a whispered desperation. Only a miracle can save him now. Sally went to her bedroom, pulled her piggy bank from its hiding place in the closet. She shook out all the change on the floor, counted it carefully 3 times. The total had to be exactly perfect, no chance here for mistakes. Tying the coins up in a cold weather kerchief, she slipped out of the apartment and made her way to the corner drugstore. She waited patiently for the pharmacist to give her attention, but he was too busy talking to another man to be bothered by an 8-year-old. Sally twisted her feet to make a scuffling noise. She cleared her throat. No good. Finally, she took a quarter from its hiding place and banged it on the glass counter. That did it. "What do you want?" the pharmacist asked in an annoyed tone of voice. "I'm talking to my brother." "Well, I want to talk to you about my brother," Sally answered back in the same annoyed tone. "He's sick, and I want to buy a miracle." "I beg your pardon?" said the pharmacist. "My daddy says only a miracle can save him now. So how much does a miracle cost?" "We don't sell miracles here, little girl. I can't help you." Listen, I have the money to pay for it. Just tell me how much it costs. The well-dressed man stooped down and asked, "What kind of miracle does your brother need?" "I don't know," Sally answered. A tear started down her cheek. "I just know he's really sick, and Mummy says he needs an operation, but my folks can't pay for it, so I have my money." "How much do you have?" asked the well-dressed man. $1.11, Sally answered proudly, "and it's all the money I have in the world." "Well, what a coincidence," smiled the well-dressed man. $1.11, the exact price of a miracle to save a little brother. He took her money in one hand, and with the other he grasped her mitten and said, "Take me to where you live. I want to see your brother and meet your parents." That well-dressed man was Dr. Carlton Armstrong, a renowned surgeon specializing in solving her brother's malady. The operation was completed without charge, and it wasn't long until he was home again and doing well. Mommy and Daddy were happily talking about the chain of events that led them to this place. "That surgery," Mommy whispered, "it's like a miracle. I wonder how much it would have cost." Sally smiled to herself. She knew exactly how much a miracle cost. $1.11, plus the faith of a little child. 98.1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Gladys Night, Forever Yesterday for the Children, and Amy Sky's Ordinary Miracles. This is Gift from My Brother. It was written by Celeste Lily Rossman, an excerpt from the collection Flowers Are Forever, a glorious garden of more than 100 inspirational stories, put together by Kathy Lemancusa, published by Fireside, a division of Simon & Schuster. And I quote, "My family always enjoyed taking strolls through the woods. We often collected native flora and would sometimes dry these keepsakes for later use. I once asked my brother, who liked to call me Flower Girl, if he minded us gathering a few things from his yard. As we ventured off, he teased, I got more weeds than roses. Truthfully, I didn't know he had any roses. His bachelor pad was not exactly landscaped, but his rose comment sparked my curiosity, and sure enough, we found them. A huge old shrub of miniature pink blossoms. I picked several handfuls and took them home to dry. Later, I strung the tiny heads into a necklace. I had no real intention of ever wearing it. I only thought it would look pretty lying on the dresser. Just a few weeks later, my brother was killed in an auto accident. As I was leaving my house on the heartbreaking day of his funeral, I went to my dresser, picked up the rose necklace, and carefully put it on. Inevitably, many of the friends and family who attended the service commented on my unusual necklace. At a time when words were few, the small blossoms gave way to healing conversation. A Gift from My Brother by Celeste Lily Rossman. From Flowers Are Forever. Published by Fireside, a division of Simon & Schuster. 98.1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, the Beatles, and Let It Be. My companion writing is called Agree to Disagree. Log on right now to the CHFI website at chfi.com. Follow the links on the homepage. And Lovers and Other Strangers returns I'm Don Jackson.
Your life set to words and music. Lovers and Other Strangers on 98.1 CHFI. Toronto's light favorites, 98.1 CHFI. And relax with us online at chfi.com.
And welcome back to Snowflakes with Lovers and Other Strangers. Now a blog as well at chfi.com. I'm Don Jackson. This is called Rescue at Sea. It was written by Dan Clark and featured in a second helping of Chicken Soup for the Soul, published in 1995. Years ago, in a small fishing village in Holland, a young boy taught the world about the rewards of unselfish service. Because the entire village revolved around the fishing industry, a volunteer rescue team was needed in cases of emergency. One night, the winds raged, the clouds burst, and a gale-force storm capsized a fishing boat at sea. Stranded and in trouble, the crew sent out the SOS. The captain of the rescue rowboat team sounded the alarm, and the villagers assembled in the town square overlooking the bay. While the team launched their rowboat and fought their way through the wild waves, the villagers waited restlessly on the beach, holding lanterns to light the way back. An hour later, the rescue boat reappeared through the fog, and the cheering villagers ran to greet them, falling exhausted on the sand. The volunteers reported that the rescue boat could not hold any more passengers, and they had to leave one man behind. Even one more passenger would have surely capsized the rescue boat, and all would have been lost. Frantically, the captain called for another volunteer team to go after the lone survivor. 16-year-old Hans stepped forward. His mother grabbed his arm, pleading, "Please don't go. Your father died in a shipwreck 10 years ago, and your older brother Paul has been lost at sea for 3 weeks. Hans, you are all I have left." He replied, "Mother, I have to go. What if everyone said I can't go? Let someone else do it." "Mother, this time, I have to do my duty. When the call for service comes, we all need to take our turn and do our part." Hans kissed his mother, joined the team, and disappeared into the night. Another hour passed, which seemed to Hans' mother like an eternity. Finally, the rescue boat darted through the fog, with Hans standing up in the bow. Cupping his hands, the captain called, "Did you find the lost man?" Barely able to contain himself, Hans excitedly yelled back, "Yes, we found him. Tell my mother, it's my older brother, Paul." .1 CHFI. If only the rescue boats had found one more alive in the film Titanic. Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On. This is William Ackerman's Two Brothers. It was featured in Chicken Soup for the Unsinkable Soul by Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, published in 1999. William Ackerman writes, and I quote, "Once upon a time in a faraway land lived two young men you may know. The two brothers were likable, but undisciplined, with a wild streak in them. Their mischievous behavior turned serious when they began stealing sheep from the local farmers, a serious crime in this pastoral place. so long ago and far away. In time, the thieves were caught. The local farmers decided their fate. The two brothers would be branded on the forehead with the letters ST for sheep thief. The sign would carry with them forevermore. One brother was so embarrassed by this branding that he ran away. He was never heard from again. The other brother, filled with remorse and reconciled to his fate, chose to stay and try to make amends to the villagers he had wronged. At first, the villagers were skeptical and would have nothing to do with him. But his brother was determined. This brother was determined to make reparation for his offenses. Whenever there was a sickness, the sheep thief came to care for the ill with soup and a soft touch. Whenever there was work needing to be done, the sheep thief came to help with a lending hand. It made no difference if the person were rich or poor. The sheep thief was there to help. Never accepting pay for his good deeds, he lived his life for others. Many years later, a traveler came through the village. Sitting at a sidewalk cafe eating lunch, the traveler saw an old man with a strange brand on his forehead seated nearby. The stranger noticed that all the villagers who passed the old man stopped to share a kind word, to pay their respects. Children stopped their play to give and receive a warm hug. Curious, the stranger asked the cafe owner, "What does that strange brand on the old man's head stand for?" "I don't know. It happened so long ago," the cafe owner replied. Then, pausing briefly for a moment of reflection, he continued, "But I think it stands for saint." Unquote. 98.1 CHFI. Lovers and Other Strangers, Burton Cummings, and Break It to Them Gently. And finally, this hour, a story called Building Bridges. Again, its author unknown. Once upon a time, two brothers who lived on adjoining farms fell into a conflict. It was the first serious rift in 40 years in farming side by side, sharing machinery and trading labor and goods as needed without a hitch. Then, the long collaboration fell apart. It began with a small misunderstanding, and it grew into a major difference, and finally it exploded into an exchange of bitter words, followed by weeks of silence. One morning, there was a knock on John's door. He opened it to find a man with a carpenter's toolbox. "I'm looking for a few days' work," he said. "Perhaps you would have a few small jobs here and there. Could I help you?" "Yes," said the older brother, "I do have a job for you. Look across the creek at that farm. That's my neighbor. In fact, it's my younger brother. Last week there was a meadow between us, and he took his bulldozer to the river levee, and now it is a creek between us. Well, he may have done this to spite me, but I'll go him one better. See that pile of lumber tearing by the barn? I want you to build me a fence, an 8-foot fence, so I won't need to see his face anymore. Cool him down anyhow." The carpenter said, "I think I understand. Show me the nails and the post hole digger. I'll do a job that pleases you." The older brother had to go to town for supplies, so he helped the carpenter get the materials ready, and then he was off. The carpenter worked hard all day, measuring, sawing, nailing. About sunset, the farmer returned. The carpenter had finished. The farmer's eyes opened wide. His jaw dropped. There was no fence there at all. It was a bridge. A bridge stretching from one side of the creek to the other, a fine piece of work, handrails and all. The neighbor, his younger brother, was coming across, his hand outstretched. Quite a fellow to build this bridge, after all I've said and done. The two brothers stood at each end of the bridge, and then they met at the middle, took each other's hand. They turned to see the carpenter hoist his toolbox on his shoulder. "No, wait. I've still a lot of other projects for you," said the older brother. "I'd love to stay on," the carpenter said, "but I've many bridges to build." Good night, sweet dreams. I'm